talk about the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is a private organization that handles the monetary policy of the United States of America. It achieves this with a process called open market operations, in which there are two primary practices. The first is a bidding and auction process where the government sells notes, bills, and bonds. Notes, bills, and bonds are called treasuries, but really they're just ways that you can loan money to the government. You see, aside from taxation, the government also gets revenue from this bidding and auction process. The government sells the treasuries, and then investors buy the treasuries at a low interest rate. The interest rates are so low because historically the government always makes good on these. Every 6 months, they pay their bills. So for an investor, it's guaranteed money even if the interest rate is low. And that might not seem like a lot. If you're only investing $100, that's what, $1.50? But if you're a big bank with a lot of money to throw around, over 10 years, that's guaranteed profit. The second primary mechanism in these open market operations is overnight lending. Overnight lending happens between banks. You see, there's a legal threshold for how much money a bank is supposed to have in reserves at all times. So if you deposited $500 into the bank, they could only loan out $450 of that. $50 legally has to stay in the reserve. At the end of the business day, it's not uncommon for banks to be under that threshold. So they'll look to other banks that have a surplus versus that threshold, and they'll get a loan from them. The interest rate applied to that loan is called the federal funds rate. Now hang with me, this is when it gets a little more confusing. So the Fed doesn't actually set the federal funds rate. It's more like a suggestion. So let's say the Fed sets this rate at 1.5. There's another important interest rate here, and that's called the discount rate. Discount rate's a little higher, but not a lot. Let's say 0.5%. So if the banks need to, they can go to the Fed as well and get these funds at a discount rate. Yeah, banks could go under the suggested rate, but that doesn't make a ton of sense in every situation. And it doesn't make a whole bunch of sense to go higher either, because why pay more? We could just go to the Fed and get it at the discount rate. Now, the way that this is popularly described is that the Fed uses these policy operations to control the health of the economy. If the economy needs an injection of growth and activity, the Fed will print money. This is the process that most refer to when the Fed will actually buy bonds from the banks. This increases supply and stimulates economic growth. When the market's moving too quickly, the Fed can depress the economy. It does this by raising interest rates and selling bonds. Now we've covered a lot, so let's summarize. You've got these open market activities where the Fed buys and sells treasuries. Overnight lending where the Fed directs the interest rate that the banks trade against so they can meet their reserve threshold levels. If this sounds a little strange to you, that's probably because it is. A lot of people question the ethical integrity of the Fed. After all, it's the only organization that's allowed to do this legally. Inject money and make it easily attainable as a way to speed up the economy. Raise rates to make it more expensive, decrease supply, and you can slow it down. So what happens to these treasuries after they're purchased by the Fed? Well, they go on the Fed's balance sheet to be paid one day. Until then, that's just more money for the government to spend. Currently, interest rates have been low for a long time. Many analysts are predicting that inflation is just around the corner. As expected, the Fed will use its open market operations tools to manipulate the economy. And so why is this a bad thing? Markets are meant to be fluid and natural, and interest rates should be market signals sent by market activities. These market signals are meant to tell the participants of the economy when to spend or when to save. But if you believe in Keynesian economics, you don't need to save. Instead, there is no cycle, and the economy is stuck in an overextension of spending. These extensions fundamentally inspire spending, and it discourages saving, because when people spend more, they save less. When the market is manipulated in this way, investors and entrepreneurs make business decisions based off of artificial market signals of the economic environment. These financial decisions made based off of artificial market signals oftentimes lead to business failure. Markets are meant to have cycles. They go up and they go down. This is normal and it's healthy. Intervention into the market distorts this process. Sure, the ups last longer and everyone loves the runs. But the downs last longer too, and they're more intense. And that's not to mention the fact that the government can't agree on a budget and can't stop spending. If the Republicans want a bigger military budget, they're not going to get it unless they play ball with the Democrats and some of their entitlement programs. All these partisan compromises do is raise the budget and increase the debt. We're just kicking the financial can down the road for someone else to solve. And all of this for the false sense of security.